This is my first YouTube video. I'm going to be doing a series of painting tutorials, Age of Sigmar. The first one we'll be doing is Retributor. I'm by no means professional, but I enjoy painting. Thought, what the hell. First thing I did is assembled the model partially, leaving off the backpack and hammer so that I could better get to the interior of the model. I cleaned it, primed it with Vallejo black primer. Establishes a very nice coat. I use my airbrush. First thing we're going to do is put a base down of Game Workshop's new gold color, specifically for these models, Retributor armor. It's a very nice, deep gold color. I'm using a wet palette that enables me to paint a little bit longer. I'm also using a premix thinner solution of 50% distilled water, 25% flow aid, and 25% slow dry. So I have plenty of time to lay down my paints. They don't dry too fast, so you don't get brush strokes in them. Just go very thin. You want to do multiple thin layers than a thick layer because you'll obscure detail if you go too thick. Just take your time. These are heavily gold models, so it's almost the entire model. That took about 3 layers, really solid gold color. Now we're going to come in with Recklin Flesh shade. It's a very red-brown shade. It complements this gold very well. Let's put on a nice good coat, not too much. You want to just aim for all the recesses and all the lines to bring out all that detail. One good coat should do fine for this. If you always lay down too much in an area, you can always just pick it back up with your brush if you have to. I always recommend washing your brush very often. Nice even coat, and as with all shades, you want to give them a good amount of time to dry. Let this dry about 45 minutes. And we're going to come in with our first gold layer. It's going to re-establish that gold look that the shade doled down. This is Uruk Armor Gold. You want to hit all the flat surfaces and raised areas. It's not a highlight, so you can go a little bit more. Just avoid the recesses and valleys where you establish that separation of detail with the shade. And I always try to imagine where the light source is coming from. On this, it's from the top left. Even though you're not doing a non-metallic metal technique and you're using metal paints, it's still good form to imagine where the light source was coming. Put a little bit more on those areas because it'll establish more of a non-metallic metal look without having to actually do non-metallic metal technique. By all means, still hit most of the areas because you want to still separate the detail. Bring out that nice gold color. There, a nice even coat, much more brighter. Yeah, you can still see the detail. Now we're going to come in with Cantor blue, do the blue areas. Not much blue on this model. It's a shoulder plate, some trim around his loincloth, and some cloth on his hammer. I came in a little bit thin on my paint. It's a little hard to control. You don't want to go too thin because you'll lose control as it flows around into the recesses. Just take your time. Getting into these details is pretty difficult. But if you move the model instead of your brush, you want to keep your brush essentially in the same place, always doing the same stroke, and just move the model to accommodate that, and it'll give you much more control, able to get into these details. About 3 layers, got a nice solid blue. Next we're going to do all the steel areas, which is the scale mail on his loincloth and his hammerhead. Not much on here for that either, primarily a gold model, as well as a symbol on his right leg. I'll hit that with the silver as well. Nice even coat. Solid. You always want to make sure any color underneath is not showing through. And we're going to come with a screamer pink for the hammer shaft. It kind of looks a little bright, but it tones way down. We're going to do a Thalmor black. We're going to hit the little soft areas in his armor, on his legs where the armor plates aren't. You just want a nice even coat. Took about 3 coats to get a nice black. So avoid the armor plates. Hit this with a gray highlight later to define it. Mephiston red. This is for his hair. And we're going to shade all these new colors with Newland oil, the blues, reds, stills, and as well as the screamer pink shaft of the hammer. It's not going to show up too much on the blue, it's such a dark blue. Just get a little in there in the recesses so that when we highlight it later it'll show up a little bit better. Now we're going to do our first highlight of the gold, Liberator gold. This is very bright gold, and it's going to, you want to hit only the very tips of points and the very highest edges. If you add too much of this, it'll establish too much of a different tone of gold. As I said before, I hit the left side because I imagine that light is coming from that direction, a little bit more than the right side and under parts. So when you hit the edges without getting into the shaded area, this will really define all those details. As you can see, it really brought out those details. The gold armor is finished. You could always do another highlight. I would add just a little bit of silver at the very tops, but I don't think it's necessary. Coming in with quicksilver for the steel areas, focusing on the bottom area of the scale mail. Just creating some nice lines on the edges of this hammer. To add a little detail, a little bit of roughness, I go in with a very light amount of paint, speckle it on, create a little bit of a patinaed speckle look. I took my X-Acto knife, put a little grooves in there for battle damage, just highlight one edge of that, the underside edge highlight. Next I'm going to highlight the hair with bloody red. Any very bright red will work. Just come in, only hit the very top edges, leaving the shaded recess. Highlight the hammer handle, come in with just straight Screamer pink to reestablish the color a little bit. Then I'm going to add dead white to up the tone, give it a much more cooler look. And it's almost white, just white with a touch of Screamer pink. You only want to lightly catch the upper side of this where the light would reflect off it. It wasn't defined enough, so I thought I'd go with a pretty high highlight here, just very lightly. Now the shadow gray to highlight the raised parts on the armor intersection. This, when it's dry, is very dark, so it's not going to be a very bright highlight, just enough to define it. This area isn't going to be seen that much anyway. Now we're going to highlight the blues with Techless Blue. It's a very cool, light blue color. Don't want to go too much with this. Just hit the raised edges, bring out the detail and all that fabric. I went a little bit too thin with my paint here, so it spread a little bit more than I'd like. Always keep your brush relatively dry, but with paint. The interior, you don't want it pooled on the outside of the brush. A little bit of highlight there to bring out that orb. I don't show it, but I put a little dot of white at the top of that orb just to give it a little reflection. I was trying to go very thin here on the shoulder, but the hair was getting in the way. I couldn't get the right angle, so I ended up establishing a much thicker highlight line than I wanted to, but it still looks okay. We're almost done. This Xandri dust is going to go on the parchment scroll on his backpack. Put a nice even layer, about 3 coats. And we're going to shade that with Athrax Earthshade. You want to really pull this in the runes and the recesses. And with all shades, you want to let them dry a good long time. And the first layer is a Shopti Bone. This is going to go over all the raised areas, all the flat areas. You don't want to go too heavy. If you go light, it gives it a nice paper speckled look. This is not really a dry brush technique, it's called an overbrush technique, where you use a little bit more paint. Then the final highlight, Flayed One Flesh, just hit the edges, really define those paper edges. And that's pretty much the completion of this model. I didn't show the painting of a few little lightning bolts with dead white. I assembled the model, based it, and that's it. Relatively simple. Takes some practice. By no means a professional painter. I do this as a hobby. I figured this would give me motivation to continue to paint my models regularly. I'll be putting out hopefully one a week. For the first foreseeable future be the Age of Sigmar starter set. The Eternal Liberators, I guess, are next. I'm going to be doing some variation in their armor. And then the Chaos after that. So I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.